La interacción oportuna familiar genera ambientes afectuosos y predecibles con la finalidad de lograr un desarrollo integral de los bebés, desde el embarazo, continuando por los primeros años de vida, fomentando relaciones y aprendizajes de calidad en sus entornos familiares. En la diversidad de poblaciones que participamos, experimentamos que tocamos vidas. Observamos miradas distintas, abrazos nuevos, madres que se dignifican, familias que disfrutan jugando y niños seguros que se sienten queridos y que tendrán, gracias a esta labor, un mejor futuro.
Es un gran privilegio contar con la participación del Dr. Stuart Shanker, ya que es uno de los científicos más reconocidos en primera infancia desde las neurociencias. Él nos propone un nuevo paradigma en el que basa la autorregulación del estrés como la clave para lograr la calma y la paz que tanto añoramos todos. El Dr. Stuart nos dice que considera que actualmente los pequeños están viviendo tiempos difíciles, presentan ansiedad, problemas de comportamiento, de salud física y mental, y considera que una de las razones de esto es el gran estrés al que están sometidos los padres y por lo tanto los niños. A partir del conocimiento del cerebro, explica cómo sintonizamos mamá-bebé mediante una conexión inalámbrica como si fuera un tipo Bluetooth, y eso hace que el bebé aprenda a autorregularse. Los pequeñitos no tienen la capacidad para lidiar con su estrés y existe un sistema en el cerebro que los lleva a estar hiperalerta y que hace que un pequeño pueda controlar un comportamiento causado por el estrés. Es diferente a un mal comportamiento, un comportamiento causado por estrés. Su mensaje esencial es que no hay niños malos, son simplemente niños que son más sensibles a un estrés que a otro. No se lo pierdan.
Stuart Shanker es conocido como una de las principales autoridades del mundo en autorregulación y desarrollo infantil. Dr. Shanker es profesor distinguido en Psicología y Filosofía en la Universidad de York en Toronto, Canadá, y CEO de The Merit Center, un centro de aprendizaje e información sobre autorregulación, aclamado autor y conferencista internacional. El Dr. Shanker se ha desempeñado como asesor y consejero en desarrollo infantil temprano para organizaciones gubernamentales de todo el mundo y se ha enfocado cada vez más en el impacto del estrés excesivo sobre el desarrollo y el comportamiento infantil.
Hello, everyone. I am Susan Hopkins, and I'm here with Stuart Shanker, the founder of the organization that I run for him, which is the Merit Center, and really the father of Self-Reg and the work of so many people here in Canada, where we're coming to you from, but also around the world. And we're filled with hope because of his work, and we're so excited that Bea invited us to be part of this very special event that you're doing as she seeks to bring self-reg to your part of the world. So I just wanted to say a quick hello and give you a chance to meet both of us. So this is Stuart.
Good
Stuart,
morning.
what would you like to tell folks?
Well, I'm absolutely delighted that we have this opportunity to talk to so many people in Latino America.
Absolutely. And you have spent some time in the Latino parts of the world. Do you want to tell anyone any bit of that background that might be interesting?
Well, I worked for many years for Dr. Fraser Mustard and was active in Mexico, both in DF and in Monterrey, in Colombia, and several cities, not just Bogota, but also Medellin, in Chile, in Peru, and especially in Cuba, where I headed up a scientific team that visited La Habana about 4 times a year for 6 years.
That's a lot of time. So you'll hear, everyone, that we're being quite informal. I'm referring to Stuart as Stuart. That is something we do in Self-Reg. I know you'll be introducing and meeting him as Dr. Stuart Shanker. But this work is not just about the expertise that he brings from his vast background and experiences. It's also about in Self-Reg, we talk about being human and oh so human. It's about ourselves as parents, it's about ourselves as human beings with dreams for a well world and healthy children and happy families. And our belief that the answers are within the people in the communities and the places where we work, and the Self-Reg as a framework, but also 5 steps and 5 domains. You're going to learn all kinds about it. Is the exact tool and vehicle to get us there. So Stuart and I are about an hour's drive apart. So I am on the other end. I'm about an hour's drive. We're in Ontario, which is considered kind of the center, I guess, of Canada. And my background is in education, and I, like all of you, like B, found my way to Stuart Shanker through really word of mouth. It was a bit of research I was doing when I was working in education. I was working on a curriculum at the time for kindergarten, and I found my way, and that was about a dozen years ago now, and it changed my life. It changed how I parent. It changed how I work. It changed how I teach. It changed how I feel. It changed the level of connection I feel with others. It was just so life-changing that I literally moved across Canada 7 years ago to join him officially. We've been working together for a decade, but to join him officially on this journey. So really pleased to welcome you into the Self-Reg family. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time, info@self-reg.ca. We're always willing to help you, to support B, and can't wait to hear more about how your event goes. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. I am really more than pleased. I'm very inspired by what's happening with this, with what B has put together. These are very tough times right now for parents, very tough times for kids. And obviously the two are closely connected. But we're in a fortunate position today. There has been an extraordinary revolution in the science of the brain and neuroscience over the past 20 years. And this is in many ways transforming our views of parenting, or helping us understand why some of the most effective practices are so effective. I'm going to try to explain, some of the most important aspects of these exciting advances, but in a way that everybody can understand. So I'll try to avoid using too many technical terms. And I'm going to start off by telling you about something that I found shocking when I first read about it, and I'm sure all of you will as well. And that is that all human children, all babies, are born premature, around 2 to 4 months premature. There's a technical term for this. It's called secondary altriciality. Essentially what it means is we believe that our babies started to be born prematurely around maybe 2 million years ago, because this allowed the brain to grow at an astonishing rate after the moment of birth, after dar la luz. So the moment that the baby enters the world, new synapses, those are the connections between neurons, new synapses start to form about 700 a minute, every single minute. Because of this discovery, we really refer to the newborn as still a fetus. The baby is a fetus outside the womb. So it's gone from being a fetus inside the mother to being a fetus that is in the external world. So that raises a very interesting question for us. If you want to talk about a newborn baby as a fetus, what takes the place of the umbilical cord? And the answer is one of the big discoveries that has been made. And the answer is called the interbrain. And the interbrain is a connection, a wireless brain connection between the mother's brain and the baby's brain. It's like a Bluetooth hookup with your iPhone. When your iPhone hooks up to the internet, there is this brain-to-brain connection. And this is huge. And it's huge because it means that not only does the mother, say, read the signs of when her baby is cold or when her baby is hungry, but because of this connection, the mother actually feels the baby's discomfort, feels the baby's anger or the baby's irritation. When we work with mothers there are some who don't feel this, what we find is that the mother is under tremendous stress. And I'm going to explain all this in a couple of minutes. But the stress interferes with this wireless brain-to-brain connection. And the same thing can happen with the baby. Some babies are born and they themselves can't tolerate this brain-to-brain connection. It's too much stress for them. Now, when a baby is born, they are bombarded with new forms of stress. The stress of probably the single greatest stress on a newborn baby is light. They've been accustomed to a very dark environment, and they're suddenly exposed to brightness. And that's what's so interesting about the Spanish expression for giving birth, dar la luz. And this tells you something very important about what we mean when scientists talk about stress. In this case, these are waves of energy that wash over the baby. Now, a stress, the definition is anything that requires the brain to burn energy in order to stay in something called homeostasis, in order to stay in balance, in order for things to be running smoothly. And you need things to run smoothly for a baby so that they grow properly, so that their immune system develops, so that they repair all the cells that get damaged. And the baby has a very limited ability to deal with stress on her own. Now, the way we deal with stress is called self-regulation. Self-regulation means literally how the body responds to stress. And a baby has a couple of mechanisms. The baby is born with a few mechanisms for regulating her stress. And one of them is falling asleep. I won't go into details here. You'd have to do a little bit more work with us in one of our courses to learn about infant sleep. Infant sleep is a very different kind of sleep from our own, from adult sleep. It's a very interesting state. But one of its chief benefits for the child is when they fall asleep, it reduces the stress of light. In fact, they can still continue to learn, which is fascinating while they're asleep, but the stress caused by what are called photons bombarding their brain is dramatically reduced. Another way that they self-regulate is by crying. And what's happening when a baby is crying is they've taken in way too much energy, the energy of noise, of sound, the energy of light. And so by crying, it's a way for the baby to get rid of all the built up energy, all the built up, and there are some chemicals that are created to deal with all this energy, and they're called neurohormones or cortisol. And by crying, the baby is basically getting rid of them. Now, if you think about it, a baby really has limited ability to self-regulate. They have a couple of these mechanisms, but they really can't deal that well with all of the stresses that are bombarding the baby. So let me give you an example. Cold temperature is a stress. It's a physical stress on the baby. When a baby gets cold, they don't have the ability to, say, pull a blanket over themselves to warm up. And here's where that interbrain that I mentioned comes into effect. The mother sees that the baby's skin is changing color, for example, becoming a little blue. And so she can put the blanket over the baby. But she doesn't just see it. The mother feels, because of this brain connection between her brain and the baby's, feels that my body is working too hard to try to, the baby's body is working too hard to try to stay warm. So this is absolutely fascinating. What's happening, the way our species work, is that the mother, the primary caregiver, whoever it is, it could be the mother, it could be a grandmother, it could be an auntie, it could be dad. Any of us can have this interbrain connection with a newborn. And we regulate the baby. And what that means is we read, we feel the baby's stress, and we help the baby manage their stresses. So if the baby's hot, we take off the blankets. If the baby's cold, we put on the blankets. We feed the baby who can't feed herself. And by being regulated in this way, the baby becomes an infant who, by the age of 3, can start to self-regulate. And here we have a very interesting example. So now the 3-year-old can tell when they need to go put a sweater on, and they're able to put it on, or at the very least, they can go to their caregiver and indicate that they're cold or indicate that they're hungry. And we all know what that's like with a 3-year-old. So what's happening here is that as the child gets older, they learn more and more ways of managing their own stress, more and more ways of reducing the stress. But one of the things that's happening today is, I mentioned at the outset, that children are having a very tough time. And we believe there are 2 reasons why this is happening. We're seeing so many problems. They may be behavior problems. They may be mental health problems. Kids, even little kids that are very anxious. Kids that get angry all the time. And what's happening, there's 2 factors. One is the stress is very high today. And why is the stress so high? Well, it could be the stress of the environment. Hot weather is a very serious stress, and it's becoming very hot. Or it could be mom and dad's stress. Parents are incredibly stressed, worried about their children, worried about what's happening in the government, worried about their own health, worried about their kids. So one of the reasons why we're seeing so many problems in children and teens is because stress levels are very high. But there's a second reason, and this is very important. As the child gets older and learns how to manage their stress, many kids today are developing what are called maladaptive ways of dealing with stress. So I'll give you an example. A maladaptive way of dealing with stress is, suppose that the kid is very tired. And fatigue is a sign that this child needs to take a rest, take a break, maybe listen to some music or just, in English we say chill, just chill for a little. But instead what's happening is that kids and teens are looking for ways to keep themselves going when they should take a break. And there's lots and lots of ways to keep yourself going. So you can do it with, say, a video game. You can do it with social media. You can do it with, there's these drinks now that are widely available that give the child lots and lots of sugar. Or here, I'm not sure about in Mexico, but here they can get drinks, they're easily accessed, that have lots of caffeine in them. Now what's happening is that the child is dealing with their fatigue, dealing with their stress by blocking it. That's what caffeine does. Caffeine basically blocks a neuron that tells us when it's time to rest. They keep themselves going. The sugar gives them a burst of energy, but you have a real problem. And this is why we call these ways of self-regulating maladaptive. And the problem is they provide a very temporary relief from the stress, but they create even greater stress down the road. So we call it maladaptive because although it provides temporary relief, it leads to greater stress, a greater drain down the road. It leads to a buildup of some chemicals which cause what we call stress behaviors. So for example, a child having a tantrum is actually a child who has been overstressed. The tantrum is the result of systems in the brain becoming very dysregulated. When a child has a tantrum, we essentially need to soothe the brain. But we also want to figure out what's led up to this. Is it that my child is hungry, overtired? These are ancient parenting wisdom, right? Reading the signs before the tantrum occurs. The tantrum is the classic example of a stress behavior. It is not misbehavior. This is a hugely important distinction, and it's one of the primary consequences of the revolution in neuroscience that I told you about. Misbehavior means that the child knows that what they're doing is something they shouldn't do. Maybe they want to see if they can get away with it. Stress behavior is not intentional. The child's behavior is caused by systems deep in the brain that have become hyperaroused. The child doesn't really know what they're doing or why. And this leads us to another hugely important distinction. In self-reg, we distinguish between self-regulation and self-control. If it's misbehavior, then we want the child to learn self-control. We want the child to learn that you shouldn't be doing this. You have to, for example, the child wants to see if they can get away with lying. And we want the child to learn that honesty is such an important quality of having a good life. But a stress behavior is a very different thing. A child cannot simply control stress behavior. If I say to a 3-year-old who's having a tantrum, control yourself, I mean, that's absurd. And it's absurd not just in a sort of obvious parenting sense, the child has no control, but in fact, the parts of the brain that would be needed for self-control have been turned off. In fact, the child doesn't even process what you're saying when you're telling the child to control themselves. So instead, we do what I mentioned before. So we have to soothe in this moment, and we have to figure out what was behind all this, what led up to this. The important point, the reason why we distinguish between misbehavior and stress behavior is because if you punish a child for stress behavior, you are in fact greatly increasing the stress that they are under. You're making the problem worse. So instead, we have to help them develop healthy ways of self-regulating, healthy ways of recognizing when they are becoming overstressed and what they can do to reduce the stresses to return to being calm. And I know that Bea has arranged that there are others that will explain to you the 5 steps of self-reg and how we teach a child these skills so that as they get older, they themselves will recognize when they are succumbing to stress behavior. This is every bit as true for a teenager or a young adult as it is for a young child. And so what happens is we learn how to reframe our kids' behavior. They could be 16, they could be 26. We learn to reframe whether this is a misbehavior, they know what they're doing and they know it's wrong, or a stress behavior, something that's caused by systems deep inside the brain. And that leads me to the next major discovery. I've used this expression, systems deep inside the brain, a couple of times. This is, in fact, the reason why we are seeing this extraordinary revolution in neuroscience. The reason is that scientists have developed tools now that allow us to see what's going on underneath the surface of the brain. And so there is a system, in self-reg we call it the red brain, underneath the thinking part of the brain. This is the limbic system. This is the source of strong emotions. It's also the part of the brain that gets hooked up with the primary caregiver in those early months of life. It's a limbic to limbic connection. The caregiver's limbic system is connected directly through wireless connection to the baby's limbic system. And what's fascinating is this kind of limbic to limbic connection will operate the entire life. The interbrains in the child's life become even more important when they become a young teenager, when they become an adult. We always have this, even when we are elderly. In fact, we now know that one of the biggest problems for the elderly is if they have no interbrains in their life, because the interbrain is a source of calmness. It's a source of being soothed. And it's fascinating because we now know why. And the short answer is that another person or the caregiver, when they stroke a child, when they cuddle a child, they are triggering neurochemicals which turn off the baby's stress. The same thing is true for us as adults. When we hug someone, we are triggering in them these neurochemicals called oxytocin, which operate at a very deep level of the brain to turn off the stress response. And what's fascinating about this is we ourselves experience the same reaction. We also get oxytocin released. So by hugging my child, I'm turning off their stress and I'm turning off my stress. It's a fascinating discovery. So when we talk about deep in the brain, what we've learned is that this system that I'm talking about now, this system that turns off the stress, operates at the very lowest levels of the brain. It operates at a system that we have no control over, that we're not even aware that it's working. All we know is that my child is upset, I stroke them, whatever, and I find that they calm down. What's fascinating is I can achieve the same thing with my child by gently talking to them or singing to them, because we also know that talking is also a form of touch. This is incredible. What we are doing with our voice is caressing the child's eardrum. But it only works to trigger oxytocin if we talk in a very gentle, soothing voice. So the way the interbrain works is we were designed to soothe our children at whatever age, and we do it at the very bottom of what's called the neural axis. So someone will take you through this model, which is called a triune brain. And basically what that means is we have up here the thinking part of the brain, the speech part of the brain, problem solving, self-awareness, empathy. Underneath that, we have the limbic system, and that is the source of strong emotions, we'll say. And then underneath that, we have what's called the midbrain and the brainstem. And here we have ancient circuits that get aroused when the child is under stress. This is a hugely important point for parenting. And the reason is the following. One of the biggest problems I saw when I worked in Mexico and South America was that a lot of parents still believed in corporal punishment. That when a child is misbehaving, they need to be maybe a slap to teach them that won't be permitted. There's a huge problem here. We've known for a long time, psychologists have known for a long time, that corporal punishment is a very troubling indicator for the child's well-being down the road. Study after study has shown that as the children get older, those that experience corporal punishment have all sorts of problems, behavioral problems, social problems, mental health problems. And now we know why. The neuroscience revolution has told us why this is so bad. And the reason is, suppose you hit a child for misbehaving. But the child wasn't misbehaving, so it was actually stress behavior. What happens when you hit the child is that the child freezes. This is an ancient defense mechanism. So the child becomes very quiet, and you think, well, now the child has learned his lesson. Now the child is listening. Now the child knows that they mustn't do this again. But in fact, when a child is in freeze, they aren't processing anything. They are simply, this is an ancient survival mechanism. Now here we come to one of the most important aspects of that triune brain model. The child may freeze. So you see the child and they're not moving, and the second that they can, they'll try to escape. But deep within the brain, at the lowest level of the brain, in the midbrain and the brainstem, these systems are activated. They're called, unfortunately, we use the same word, but they're called a fear system or a panic distress system. What that means is that the neurons at the base of the brain are activated and stay activated for a very long time. And when these neurons are activated, they cause the body to burn all of its energy. What happens is that although the child isn't, they're not saying anything, they become very quiet, very still, inside, their heart is beating very fast, their brain is oscillating very quickly. They have what's called hyperarousal, and it's at a very low level of the brain. And the reason why you see this correlation between corporal punishment and later problems in life is because they are burning all this energy because these systems don't easily turn off. So one of the most important consequences is parents have to learn a fundamental truth. I've done this for a long time. I've seen thousands and thousands of children and teens. And in all the kids I've ever met, I have never once met a bad kid. There isn't such a thing. What there are kids that are much more stressed than other kids. Kids that are highly stressed, maybe because of something happening in the home, maybe because of something happening inside the child. Some children, I gave an example just yesterday that's a very nice one. Some kids absolutely love the noisy classroom. And the reason is they may be a little what's called hyposensitive to noise. And so being in the noisy classroom, what it does is it wakes up their brain. It gives them a neurohormone called dopamine, which is motivating, which is exciting, gives a burst of energy. But another child may be very sensitive to noise. And for that child, different neurohormones are triggered. Something called epinephrine or norepinephrine. This child has a heightened stress response to the noise. And what that means is they start burning energy, burning glucose. And the more glucose they burn, just trying to stay calm, the less glucose they have left for learning, for paying attention to what the teacher is saying. That's why these are the kids that we see that have problems, say, in behavior or problems in attention. But they're not bad kids. They're overstressed kids. And that's why it's so important to us to see that there isn't such a thing as a bad child. There's just kids that some kids have to work much harder than other kids. Now, the larger implication of all this is that children go through what we describe as 4 major states of energy and tension. This is called a Thayer matrix. And again, someone will give you a copy of the Thayer matrix and help you understand how to use this. But essentially, what the Thayer matrix tells us is that in order for a child to do really well in school, to have friends, to be happy, to just wake up in the morning raring to go, they have to have a lot of energy and not too much tension. When children are struggling, they get stuck in the bottom right of the Thayer matrix. They get stuck having very low energy and very high tension. Why? Why are they stuck there? What has sent them into this bottom right part of the Thayer matrix? And the answer is far too much stress and maladaptive ways of dealing with the stress. This is not a bad kid. This is a kid who is basically running on empty. So what we want to do with this child is we want to figure out why does this child have so much stress? And what sorts of things is my child doing or my teen doing that may be making the problem of stress even worse? So we become, as you'll learn, what are called stress detectives. This is important because many of the stresses that our kids are under are what we call hidden stresses, stresses that we don't even think of as stresses. So we begin to learn when the child is in an overstressed state, leading them, using up all of their energy, increasing their tension. And what we can do to soothe, reduce, get them back into a healthy state of balance. Why is this so important? Because what we're seeing is a generation of children who do not know what it feels like to be calm. Calm in their body, calm in their mind. It's absolutely essential that children learn how to be calm. Why? Why is this so important? Because the 5th step of self-reg is called restore. And restoration refers to a biological process. This is a process where the brain secretes a different chemical called acetylcholine. This is healing. This is restorative in a physical sense. But also, it restores the child's connection, their interbrain connection with their caregivers, whoever they might be. Why is this huge? It is because of what I told you before. When the child is overstressed, they need that interbrain connection. They need that touch. They need that soothing voice. They need that sense of security, which turns off the stress response so that they can begin to restore. In fact, of all the mechanisms that we look at for dealing with stress, the number one, the most important, the most effective is that loving relationship with their primary caregivers. So if a child is overstressed, one of the things that happens is they may resist, they may turn away from that connection. They may withdraw into themselves. And that makes the stress even worse. But you can't force them you can't force the child to come and be hugged or to come and sit with you. Instead, what you do is you reduce the stresses, reintroduce healthy ways of dealing with stress, and then the child's desire for that connection will naturally come back. I won't explain it today. It's a little bit complicated, but there are a different set of neurons deep in the midbrain that motivate the child to be with you, motivate the child to come to you for comfort. But under extreme stress, these neurons, they are actually a species of dopamine neuron, these neurons turn off. So that's what self-reg is all about. Self-reg is all about reframing our child's behavior, recognizing stress behaviors when they occur, knowing how to proceed so that the stress behaviors naturally disappear. This is essential for a healthy child, a healthy teen, or a healthy young adult. But it's also essential for us. It's essential for us as parents. So we need to do all the things you're about to learn in this event that B has put together. They apply to your well-being as much as they apply to your kids. In order to be able to do the sorts of things that I've been talking about, to be that calming, soothing presence, you have to be calm and soothed yourself. You have to turn off your own stress alarm. So self-reg, we say, starts with self. In fact, the reason why thousands now of parents across the world are doing self-reg is because of what Susan said at the very start. This is transformational for us as parents. And then we return to the point I made at the very start. By being in this state, by having this interbrain connection with our kids, what happens is not only are we turning off their stress response, but in so doing, we're turning off our own. We are giving ourselves the same soothing neurochemicals that the child needs. As I look at the world today, it is absolutely clear to me that it is essential that people like B are doing this, bringing this newest knowledge to every single parent so that we can finally change the direction in which our society has been going for a while now. It is time for us to heal our children, heal ourselves, and in so doing, heal our society. And this, I should just tell you at the very end, is the great dream that Susan and I share that have brought us together. This is the dream of self-reg. So good luck, everyone, and have a wonderful conference.